My daughter's new piano teacher looked familiar. Then I realized she was the one. Who got away, Ryan? Callahan had built his life in Denver around routine, the kind of routine that kept a single father from drowning. Wake at 6, coffee black, breakfast for his daughter Ellie, drop off at school, work at the architecture firm downtown, pick up, dinner, homework, bed. Repeat. It had been 3 years since his wife passed. And in that time, Ryan had learned that grief didn't disappear. It just got folded into the schedule until it stopped screaming and settled into a dull ache he carried like a second job. Ellie was 8 now, all gap-toothed smiles and stubborn curls, and for months she had been begging for piano lessons. Everyone in my class plays something, she'd said, arms crossed, the same stubborn set to her jaw that her mother used to have. Ryan had put it off, not because he didn't want to give her the world, but because a piano teacher meant a stranger in his house twice a week, meant opening a door he'd kept mostly closed since Sarah died. But he couldn't say no to Ellie, not when so much had already been taken from her. He found the flyer at the community center, simple black text on cream paper. Piano lessons. Patient. Experienced all ages, contact Claire Bennett. No photo. He called the number, and the voice on the other end was warm, unhurried, the kind of voice that made you want to keep talking, even after the conversation was supposed to end. They scheduled the first lesson for a Tuesday afternoon. When the doorbell rang that Tuesday, Ryan wiped his hands on his jeans and opened the door, already rehearsing the polite small talk he'd prepared. The words dissolved the second he saw her face. Claire Bennett stood on his porch in a soft blue cardigan, sheet music tucked under one arm. And for a moment, neither of them said anything at all. Ryan's mind scrambled backward through years, through a version of his life he rarely let himself visit, to a small apartment in Chicago and a girl named Claire Whitfield who used to fall asleep with headphones in, humming melodies she swore she'd write down one day and never did. "Ryan," she said finally, and her voice cracked on his name like she wasn't sure it was allowed to. "Claire." He almost laughed at the absurdity of it. 12 years. 12 years since she'd packed 2 suitcases and left a note on the kitchen counter that he still, somehow, remembered word for word. 12 years since he'd told himself it didn't matter anymore. And here she was, standing on his porch with a piano bag, having no idea whose daughter she'd agreed to teach. Ellie appeared behind him, oblivious to the current running between the two adults. "Are you my teacher?" she asked, practically vibrating with excitement. Claire's eyes flicked to the girl, then back to Ryan, searching his face for permission, for anger, for anything that would tell her how to move through the next 60 minutes. Ryan swallowed everything he wanted to say and stepped aside. "Come in," he said. "She's been waiting all week." That first lesson was almost unbearable in its normalcy. Claire sat beside Ellie at the old upright piano that had belonged to Sarah's mother, patiently walking her through hand position, through middle C, through the quiet triumph of a child playing her first real note. Ryan hovered in the kitchen doorway pretending to read something on his phone, stealing glances at the woman who used to be the entire architecture of his future. After Claire left, Ellie ran into the kitchen glowing. "She's the best teacher ever, Dad. Can she come every week?" "Every week," Ryan said and meant it, even though his chest felt like it had been cracked open and left exposed to weather. The lessons continued. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 4 o'clock, an hour that Ryan started arranging his entire work schedule around without admitting to himself why. He told himself it was for Ellie, that a good teacher was hard to find, that uprooting her again after everything she'd already lost would be cruel. All of it was true. None of it explained why he found reasons to be home early, why he made 2 cups of coffee instead of 1, why he'd started listening for her car in the driveway. 3 weeks in, after Ellie had gone upstairs to change out of her school clothes, Claire lingered at the door instead of leaving. "I didn't know," she said quietly, "when I took the listing. I didn't know it was your house, your daughter." "I know," Ryan said. "You wouldn't have come." "That's not true." Claire's hands twisted, the strap of her bag. "I would have come. I just would have been more scared." Ryan wanted to ask her 100 things. Why she left, why she never called, not once, not even to say she was alive and well and building some other life somewhere he wasn't. Why fate or coincidence, or whatever cruel architecture governed small towns and community center flyers, had dropped her back into his living room with a stack of beginner sheet music. Instead, he asked the safest question he could find. "Where did you go after?" Claire's eyes dropped to the floor. "Portland first, then Boston. I taught music at a school for a while. I got married." She said the last part fast, like ripping off a bandage. "It didn't last. He wasn't—" She stopped herself. "It doesn't matter. I've been in Denver for 8 months. I didn't come here looking for you, Ryan. I promise you that." "I believe you," he said. And he did. Denver was a big city. This was either an act of God or the universe's cruelest joke, and Ryan hadn't decided which. Weeks passed. Ellie improved rapidly, the way children do when they're allowed to love something without complication. She played her first full song at the end of October, a clumsy but earnest rendition of a folk tune, and when she finished, Claire clapped so hard her hands turned pink, and Ryan felt something in his chest give way entirely. It was raining hard one Thursday when Claire mentioned, almost as an aside while packing up her bag, that she still hid in the bathtub during storms. Ellie, overhearing from the hallway, gasped in delighted recognition. "I do that too." "Dad thinks it's silly." "It's not silly," Claire said, crouching to Ellie's height. "The bathtub is the safest, coziest place in a storm. Ask your dad. I used to make him sit with me under a blanket in the tub during storms." "Didn't I, Ryan?" Ryan's throat tightened. She remembered. Of course she remembered. Some things didn't erase no matter how many years or cities you buried them under. "You used to fall asleep before the storm even ended," Ryan said, the memory rising unbidden and warm. Claire smiled, small and sad. "You used to make hot chocolate. Too much cinnamon. You never complained." "I always complained. You just never listened." For the first time since she'd walked back into his life. They were laughing, actually laughing. The old easy rhythm between them flickering back to life, like a pilot light that had never fully gone out. That night, after Claire left and Ellie was asleep, Ryan sat on the porch steps in the cooling air and allowed himself, for the first time in 3 years, to imagine a future that wasn't just grief management. He thought of Sarah, and the thought didn't come with guilt, only gratitude, and a strange permission he hadn't expected to give himself. The following week, Ellie asked Claire to stay for dinner, and Claire, catching Ryan's eye for approval, stayed. The three of them ate at the kitchen table, and it was easy in a way Ryan hadn't realized he'd been starving for. After Ellie went up to bed, Ryan and Claire sat on the porch with 2 mugs of coffee between them. The same porch where she'd first reappeared in his life like a ghost he thought he'd exorcised. "I never forgot you," Claire said finally, staring at the steam rising off her mug rather than at him. "I want you to know that. Leaving wasn't about not loving you. I was 23 and terrified, and I thought I'd ruin your life if I stayed, because I didn't know how to be anything except a person who runs. I've spent 12 years regretting it." Ryan let the silence sit for a moment, weighing everything the silence contained. "I spent a long time being angry," he admitted. "Then Sarah came into my life, and I built something good, something real, and I stopped being angry because I didn't have room for it anymore. But when you showed up on my porch, all of it came back, not just the anger, everything." "I'm not asking you for anything," Claire said quickly. "I'll understand if you want a different teacher for Ellie. I don't want to complicate your life." "You already have," Ryan said, and when Claire's face fell, he reached over and took her hand before she could pull away entirely. "But maybe I don't mind the complication." Claire looked up at him, eyes bright with something between disbelief and hope. "Ryan, I'm not the same person you left," he said. "I've grieved, I've rebuilt, I've raised a daughter alone and somehow kept both of us standing. I'm not going to pretend 12 years didn't happen, but I also can't pretend that watching you with Ellie every week hasn't made me feel something I thought I'd buried for good." They didn't solve everything that night. There was no dramatic kiss under the porch light, no music swelling to signal happily ever after. What there was, instead, felt more honest. 2 people who had hurt each other and grown into different versions of themselves, deciding, cautiously, to find out if there was still something worth building. Over the following months, Claire remained Ellie's piano teacher, and slowly, carefully, she became something more in Ryan's life too. She met him for coffee on weekends. She came to Ellie's school recital, and cried harder than anyone in the audience when Ellie played her song without a single mistake. She told Ryan in pieces about the years in between, the marriage that had crumbled because she'd never stopped comparing it to what she'd left in Chicago, the music school job that had given her purpose but not peace, the nights she'd almost looked him up online and always talked herself out of it because she didn't think she deserved to. Ryan in turn told her about Sarah, not to compare, but because Sarah's memory deserved to exist in the same room as this new, tentative thing growing between him and Claire. Claire listened without flinching, without jealousy, understanding instinctively that loving someone who had loved before wasn't a threat. It was proof that he knew how to love well. On a cold evening in late November, almost a year after, Claire had first knocked on his door with sheet music tucked under her arm. Ryan found her sitting at the piano after Ellie's lesson had ended, playing something slow and unfamiliar. "What's that?" he asked from the doorway. "Something I wrote," Claire said, not stopping. "I finally wrote one down. Took me long enough." Ryan sat beside her on the bench, the same bench where his daughter had learned her first song, and listened as Claire finished the piece, an aching, hopeful melody that sounded like coming home after a very long time away. It's called The One Who Stayed, Claire said quietly when she finished. I wanted it to be about you, about us, if that's something you still want. Ryan didn't answer with words. He kissed her instead softly. There on the piano bench, 12 years and one determined 8-year-old later, finally closing the distance that had opened. Between them so long ago in a Chicago apartment neither of them had ever really left behind. Ellie found them there minutes later, unbothered and matter-of-fact in the way only children can be. Does this mean Claire's staying for dinner again? Every night if she wants, Ryan said, looking at Claire, who laughed through tears and nodded. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall, quiet and steady, blanketing the porch where a chance flyer and a stubborn 8-year-old's piano dreams had somehow rewritten the ending of a story Ryan thought had closed for good. Some people, it turned out, were never really the one.